Yeah, that clock is about a minute slow.
Are you streaming? Not showing? 5:30. There we go. Yep. It's live.
All right, video's up. It's 5:30. We'll get started. Don't want to keep you guys here all night. I know there's going to be some questions. Just to introduce myself, my name's John Kimmel. I'm the fire chief here in Harvard. I've been here, it'll be 2 years in June. A little bit about my background. I'm 23 years in the fire service. Most all of my time has been spent in Marengo, except for the last few years. I've split my time between Marengo and Harvard. My experience with referendums and the taxing and budgets and all that, I've been a part of 2 referendums in Marengo, and this would be now my 3rd up here in Harvard. A little bit about how we got here, how I got to Harvard. The fire district was going through some pretty tough times. A lot of changeover with the chiefs and some board members. So when I was asked, and actually it was the fire district in Marengo and rescue district in Marengo, their members were asked if they would be willing to share me and come up here to Harvard and help them out. My experience with Harvard has always been positive. I went through EMT class here. I have a lot of friends on this department, so for me the answer was easy. It was yes, I'm in. Let's do it. So that's how we got here. How we got to where we are tonight for the referendum, we're struggling. And on paper, it may not look like we're struggling, but we're struggling. And we're going to show you how and why we need to run that referendum. So Mayor, go ahead. So what is the referendum? March 19th, you'll be asked to place your opinion, yes or no, for the referendum for the Harvard Fire Protection District to increase our tax rate. Go ahead. Why do we need it? Well, several years ago, well, not even several years, 4, we made some decisions as the board at the time, which is 3 of those members are no longer on the board. Laura Evers was on the board at the time, and Josh Kelnhoffer were on the board at the time. We traded in 5 vehicles. We traded in an ambulance. We traded in a brush truck. We traded in a squad. We traded in, what else am I missing? The
Ladder
engine.
truck.
Oh, excuse the ladder truck, our platform. And then we sold an engine for $50,000. What we got in return was a ladder truck that came out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, from the city of Pittsburgh, that was purchased without going to look at it. It was purchased off the internet from a used fire truck company, delivered to us, and when we got it, it was in complete disarray. We owned that vehicle for 2 years and it never ran a call. What that did to our fleet, for a rural department, we had no spare engine for 2 years. If our engine would have gone down, when I got here, we had 1 engine. If our engine would have gone down, we had no engine in our district. Now we're asking Marengo or Woodstock or Hebron, hey, can we borrow an engine? Right? And if they don't have one for us to borrow, now we're responding in a tender that at that time, only 500 GPMs a minute is what it can pump, which is not adequate fire flow, and only 2 people can go in that vehicle. So we have 2 people responding to a structure fire in a vehicle that can't push enough water and can't carry enough personnel and equipment, okay? So what we've done in the interim, one of the first things I did when I came in, which if you read the Northwest Herald, is I looked at our budget, I said, geez, man, we are really heavy on payroll, really heavy. Payroll was staggered based on seniority, certifications, all that good stuff. I cut it, I said, nope, everybody, if you're a firefighter, paramedic, you're making $20 an hour. If you're a firefighter, EMT, you're here. If you're an EMT, you're here. If you're just a paramedic, you're here. All right, we cut payroll right away. Some of the people in our department got cut by over $4 an hour, but stayed with us. And that's awesome. They understood the situation we were in, because we needed to replace equipment. With rural fire departments, when it comes to vehicles, we're not like Arlington Heights or Palatine or Huntley or Woodstock. We don't have multiple stations. When an engine goes down, this one's going to pick it up. When our engine goes down, we have to have one there to replace it. So we needed to look at equipment. So we bought an engine from the Algonquin Lake and the Hills Fire Department. It's an older engine. It fits our needs for now, but we paid $185,000 for that, and we purchased that. What we did in the interim is we tried and we worked with the company that they bought that ladder truck from Pittsburgh. We worked with them to try to get something else in here. We need to make this deal right, okay? You know, essentially we bought a lemon, make it right. So after 14 months probably of working with them, we got to a point where we worked out a deal to get another tender, but it's a tender pumper. So it carries a lot of water. It's got a big engine or a big pump on it so it can pump fires. So that replaced the one tender that we had gotten rid of. So now we have two engines and two tenders, which is what you need, because if one goes down, you gotta have something else to go, right? So that was valued, that whole trade-in and sale and all that stuff was valued at about $350,000. So this tender pumper we bought is a used chassis with a brand new pump and tank on it. Carries 2,500 gallons of water. So we've gotten to a point now where we're looking really good with our equipment. The other thing that we purchased, and we were hoping to take delivery of it in the next week or so, is a remount ambulance. We applied for a grant. We received it. It's a $200,000 grant, and that's to buy this ambulance. But it's a trick. The state fire marshal calls it a grant, but it's not. It's a loan. It's a zero interest loan for $200,000. So what we did is we worked with our dealer. We bought a remount, which is a brand new chassis. So it's a 2024 Ford E450 chassis. And the box on it where we work, where the medics are and all the equipment goes, that's a remount. That's a used box that came off of an older ambulance. It actually came off an ambulance that was owned by the Carpentersville Fire Department. So now we have we'll have two frontline ambulances, and we'll have a spare, which we didn't have a spare before. And if you're familiar with Harvard and in our call volume, there's several times throughout the day where we're getting back-to-back calls. So both ambulances are out. So talked a little bit about wages, cut wages. Another part of this referendum is to increase our wages. We need to stay competitive. I can tell you that in Marengo, we're 50 cents higher than Harvard right now an hour, so we're not there either. We're competing against departments like McHenry. They're paying $25, $26, and sometimes even $30 an hour, depending on certifications and all that. Woodstock's, they're increasing. So it's really hard to attract people to come here and work with the wages that we're paying. So we're going to start working on that this year. We're going to start trying to do some different things, and I'll talk a little bit about how we're going to be able to do some of those things this year later on. Our building, if you're familiar with it, used to be the city garage. It was retrofitted and made into the fire station. It's 25 years since we've had it. If you walk around our station, you'll notice the parking lot's in disarray. The parking lot needs to be redone. Our furnaces and air conditioners need to be redone. Our garage doors all need to be redone. Our man doors, the system that we have, it's not a keyed system. It's a punch code or a key fob. That system's outdated and needs to be redone. So there's a lot of things, a lot of money that's going to have to go into that building. And additional personnel. Right now, we can afford to staff 3, and we try to staff 3 as often as we can. Our budget, our payroll budget especially, is taking a huge hit. And it's taking a huge hit because we can't attract people to come here and work based off of what we pay. So on times when we're short and we need a paramedic, we only have one person at the station or 2 EMTs at the station, we need a paramedic. We're going to hire out, we have an agreement with Northwest Rescue who's going to bring a paramedic over, but instead of paying that paramedic $20 an hour, we're paying $55 an hour to have that paramedic here. So that's really eating into our budget, especially on the payroll side. Ideally, for the size of our department, our call volume, we should have at a minimum 4 personnel. And when we start looking at some of the numbers, we'll talk about some of the staffing levels of other departments. But ideally for Harvard, 4 people would be where we would want to get to with this referendum. That would mean if we had an ambulance call, 2 people would be on one ambulance, second ambulance call comes in, those other 2 jump on the other ambulance, and then they respond from there. So how do we compare? So we compare to other fire districts financially. We're 12th out of 15 in revenue, out of the 15 departments in McHenry County. So I want to ask this question, and this will be good for some of the members that are here. This will be good training for them. We might even write it up. Do you understand how your taxes are levied? How do we get to that point? Is everybody familiar with that? Because I think that's important. Okay, because it does vary if you live in town versus if you live out of town. Okay, there's different ways they look at that. The first thing that they're going to do is they're going to look at what's your property address and what's your EAV. EAV is estimated assessed value. So what's the whole town or your township worth? Okay, once they have that number, then they're going to take the fire district's multiplier, which I'll show you here in the next slide, and they're going to apply that, and that's how they determine what your rate's going to be. Okay, and that's important to know because this is how we get to where we need to be in the future. Okay, go ahead, Mayor. So here's some comparables that I threw up. I didn't want to throw up Huntley and McHenry and Crystal Lake, especially Crystal Lake because they're a municipality, they're not a district. You know, those guys are on a whole new spectrum, right? They're way away from where Harvard is and Marengo and all of these other ones. So I also put the call volumes up there so we can kind of look at that. But here's the important things to look at. It says operating budget, but that's what they're bringing in tax revenue. That's not operating budget. I was having some computer issues. I had a virus today, which was the worst time. So I was trying to fix that, and I was having a hard time doing it. So just so we're all clear, and I can back that documentation up right up here in paper. But that is actually what they bring in tax revenue, not operating. Because operating budget's going to be a little bit more, depending on their call volume, depending on what they bill, all of those good things, right? So this is just what we bring in tax revenue. The levy rate on the far right, that's what we call our multiplier. I like to work in whole numbers, but for whatever reason, the county clerk and how they do it, they do a 6-digit figure when they do that multiplier. But that's the number that they multiply into what your estimated assessed value is. So as I look through this, I'm looking at it, and so you understand, let's start with Marengo, because that one's unique. So Marengo, you can see that's Marengo Fire and Marengo Rescue. We are 2 separate districts in Marengo. We function as one, but we're 2 separate districts. So we have 2 separate tax rates, okay? How that compares to the rest of these departments, the rest of these departments provide fire and EMS. So they have a corporate rate, which is what Marengo Fire is, and they have an EMS rate, which is what Marengo Rescue is. Both of those are capped at 0.4. So Marengo, we are capped. We're at our 0.4. The way they run it out with the 6 numbers, I've asked Bridget over at the county 1,000 times, I feel like I'm getting shorted here because we're supposed to be capped, but she promises me because they run it out 6 digits like that, it's the same amount. So we're capped at 0.4. We can't go any higher. We can't run another referendum. We can't do any of that stuff, right? You look at Spring Grove. So the rest of these numbers, like Spring Grove at their 0.598889, that's the whole picture. But when they do their budget, they're going to take that number and they're going to split it, probably 60-40, because that's what our accountants do with ours. So 60 of that would be the EMS fund, 40 of that would be the corporate fund. Does that make sense? So that number almost gets split in half. And that's how the rest of those are. So everybody in the county is capped at 0.9, or excuse me, 0.8. And then it's split between the corporate and the EMS. I'm sure somebody's going to ask, but Chief Kimmel, why is Woodstock at 0.940172? That's because they're in the Article 4 downstate pension. They apply a separate tax just for the pension. So when you look, if you're a resident of Woodstock, you would have the firefighter pension fund, the corporate fund, and the EMS or ambulance fund. That's how theirs would play out. So that's why they're over the 0.8. So as we compare at the 0.328899, you look at, we bring in this year, based on our most recent budget, or treasurer's report, we brought in $1,052,999.31. That's our tax revenue. Okay. As we compare to others, none does, a little bit higher than us. Hebron's obviously lower than us, but if you look at their tax rates, they're much higher. Okay. So what the position that they're in right now, as growth comes to those towns, they're going to exceed and pass Harvard quickly. Spring Grove, I don't know how often you go to Spring Grove. Harvard has a lot more to offer than Spring Grove. And call volume wise, they're running 884 calls, we're running 1,340. So we're running more calls on less money. Okay, so I think this is a great slide. I think this really shows why and where and what our future looks like. I think if you go around town, if we can get this increase, I think in 5 years' time, I don't have a crystal ball or anything and say that this is the way it's going to be, but it really sets us up for that point to where we're going to start needing full-time personnel. Volunteers and part-time people aren't beating down the doors of any job in the United States right now. Unless you live in a hole and you don't watch the news, you know that. And public service is even worse. We can't get cops. We can't get paramedics. We can't get firefighters. So this is a really important slide. And if you take anything from this presentation, I really want you to look at this side and look at where we're at call volume wise. Look at what we're bringing in tax revenue, and look at where our rate's at comparatively to other people. Okay. So as far as calls go, call volume, we rank about 15th. Again, I didn't have everybody up there, but we're about 15th in the county in terms of call volume. What's that? Or I'm sorry, 8th. I'm looking at the 15 on my 8th out of the county. If I had go to the next one. I don't know if that, okay, I did good on there. We actually went down in calls this year and last year when the stats came out. Reason being, we can't afford to send anybody out of town to help our neighbors. That's why we went down on call volume. We cannot run mutual aid. We are members of the mutual aid box alarm system, or MABUS. Our division is MABUS Division 5. That's all the McHenry County departments. Fortunately for us, Marengo, Woodstock, Hebron have been phenomenal. Sending ambulances up here all the time, sharing, right? But on the weekends, we occasionally can get somebody out because people are home from work, but definitely during the day. Sometimes at night we can. But we typically aren't sending people out of town just because we don't have the manpower to do that.
Can you explain that? $70, 100,000?
Yes.
Is that the actual value of the home, or is that the tax value?
So that's it. That is what the county is. That's your assessment. They're saying your tax assessment, your tax value is per 100,000. So it's 170 per 100,000. 0.17. I can bring it up for you. Yeah, it's right. It's 0.17. Blah 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 blah. Yeah.
So if on your tax bill it says 48,000, you multiply that times 3, and that's what you're paying on.
No.
Yes.
No.
Because on your tax bill it says your net is 48.
Your equalized assessed value is a third of.
Is the
I'll show you.
One third of the cash is the equalized assessed.
I'll come back to that because I have the papers up here, and let me dig it through. So I'll come back to that. Okay, but yes, on 100,000 it's 170. So if what you're saying, Amy, it's 48 times 3 to get to the 170, to get to that 100,000.
It'll be more, because my home will be be valued at $150,000,
If your home is valued at $150,000,
you're not paying
You're-
the one cent. That's what we're trying to ask. So if you look at your tax bill, it says net assessment, let's say my house has $47,000.
okay?
That's not based on that. We have to multiply that times 3 to what you're asking for. So it should be 47,000 times 3, and that total amount is what we're gonna be taxed on.
So I couldn't put the question in this presentation, but I have the question here, so we will go over the question and it breaks it down and we'll look at it, okay? Because our attorney wrote this along with the county clerk, and what their explanation to me is, if your house is worth $100,000, that your assessment, is $100,000, you're gonna go up $170 a year on your tax bill. That's the way it was explained to me.
So if it's
I'm not
3,000,
familiar-
it
go-
goes 3 times that.
What's that?
If you have a $300,000 home, it's 3 times.
It's 3.
Just to
If
show
you have a $1 million home, it's gonna be 10 times that, right? It's just to show that per what your value, 100,000 value is, this is what it would go up. That's why I don't understand I gotta look at your tax bill and get an understanding of that, because I think we're talking differently.
Well, the reason that it was brought up earlier was because I had said, how is that gonna work? Everybody's gonna read $170. Oh, that'll be perfect. $170 we can sway. And then
But if you read the question,
it doesn't say
and-
that. It's not worded the way most people would understand it. That's why I asked you the question. Because now my parents' land is valued at over $500,000.
okay,
But you have it listed as assessed value on your referendum.
correct.
On their tax bill, it says net assessed value is $71,000. So if they're like, oh yeah, cool, 71,000, it's only $170 for me, I'm not worried about that. Oh no, when they get it and they find out that it's gone up 5 times 170, that's a big
No,
jump.
I think you're doing that wrong. You're doing that wrong. Because why would you multiply it 5 times?
Because you got $100,000, their land is worth $500,000. So you have to multiply that 170 times 5.
Correct, on 100,000, you keep going back to 48 times 5. It's not 48 times 5.
But you're saying the assessed value. On your tax bill, it says net assessment.
Okay, but what says on your tax bill, what's in the state statute? No, okay, but let me finish. Because we have a question section. I wanted to get to the question section before we got into all of this back and forth, but what state statute says on how that needs to be worded? There is no choice by the fire district, the county clerk, our attorney. State statute says it has to be worded this way. How the county clerk breaks out your taxes and sends you your tax bill, that's how they do it. What I'm telling you is what we have to take the assessed value,
Correct.
and
You
that
have home
multiplier.
value. So
That's where that number comes from. So what it says on your tax bill is different than what we can put into the question. The question is set in state statute. I didn't bring it with me tonight.
assessed value.
Okay, then that's,
And that's not the same as your home value.
but you're talking $500,000 of property.
But that's why we're asking.
Right, so
the question,
it's
because I think
170
should be
times
like-
5. If you own $500,000 of property, it's 170 per 100,000 on that
Like I
value.
said, my house is valued at $250,000.
Okay,
My assessed value is $47,000.
times 3, okay?
You're saying home value, so I should be paying on 200,
Correct.
250,000. But in the referendum, it says home assessment value.
Okay, I will contact our attorney, and I'll get you that answer, because that's the way it reads in the state statute. We don't have a choice on how
But that's
we
why
word
we're
the
here
question.
to ask that question.
Okay, and I will get you the answer,
Perfect.
okay? All right, next slide. So what happens if we don't get the tax increase? We keep doing what we're doing. We're kicking the can down the road, right? If you call 911, we're gonna respond. And we're gonna respond with what we got. And we're gonna do the best we can. That ambulance may come out of Harvard, it may come out of Marengo, it may come out of Woodstock, may come out of Hebron. It's just gonna depend where we're at that time of day. You know, I don't know about you guys, but if you can go from Harvard to Marengo and hold your breath, or Harvard to Hebron, depending on where you are, That's the potential. And that's a reality. Response times matter. And I can tell you that 2 nights ago, it mattered. There was a fire in another town where 2 people died. It matters. And I was on that call. It matters. We have to get our staffing levels up. We have to get people to respond to calls. We can't keep relying and just hoping that nothing happens. Okay? I've kind of already talked about some of this already. Reducing salaries, replacing some of the equipment we've done, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. But, we're doing the best we can with what we got. It's older equipment, it's going to have to be replaced sooner rather than later. But that's all we need. Go ahead, next one. So, questions. I'm going to run through these and then we'll get back in. And, if you want to come up here, use the microphone, because I don't know how much of the back and forth that got onto YouTube, so people weren't able to hear. I would ask that you come up there and use the microphone to ask those questions. Okay? So, Amy, these probably look familiar.
They do, everything
Okay.
I emailed you.
Yep, everything Amy emailed me, and I appreciate that, because I'm sure, like you said, a lot of people have those questions. And so I want to go over those. So, do we charge for services, and is it different from a resident to a non-resident? The answer to that question is yes, we do charge for services, as do every other fire department, rescue in McHenry County. They all charge for services. Okay? What I can tell you is that we did not charge our residents up until about a year ago. We passed an ordinance
It's been longer
that's,
than that.
no, it hasn't. I can
But
tell you,
I got a bill in 3 years ago. for
because you
guys.
probably got it from another department.
No.
Well, show me the invoice, because I can tell you
I have
that
it.
it didn't come from us.
It was $1,712 to take my husband half a block.
I thought we took him by helicopter.
You drove him from the intersection of 173 and Marengo Road, and then he went by helicopter. The helicopter bill was $68,000. With the Harvard Fire District, my bill was $1,700.
Okay, did you pay it?
My insurance covered all of it,
Okay,
because we had method deductible.
okay, so your insurance paid it, which is what we're gonna do. So I'll get to that. No, don't, just let me finish. I want to answer the questions. That's why I put your questions up here. Okay? What we do for residents prior to 12 months ago, 18 months, whatever it's been, is you got a bill as a resident. If your insurance paid it, which they did, we took it. If your insurance didn't pay it, we didn't charge you. We didn't come after you for the $1,600. We would have written it off just like we have. And I know this because when I got here and I looked at their billing ordinances and I looked at all their billing statements, we were giving away over $400,000 in billing. Gone. Is that financially smart? No. Not when we're struggling, right? But, so how did we fix it? What was our Band-Aid? We're still billing you as a resident. But if your insurance picks up, you get that $1,500 bill. Your insurance only picks up $100 of it. We're going to ask you to pay $600 and we're going to write off the rest. If your insurance picks up the whole thing, great. We're done, right? We capped our residents at $600. If you're a non-resident, in our opinion, if you are a non-resident of this fire district, you are not paying taxes here. You're paying the whole amount. No questions asked. And we will take you to collections if you don't. I mean, that's where we're at. So we've tried to find other ways to increase our revenue. This has helped. One of the other things that we've done is we signed up for this GEMT program. What this does, it's through the state. And what they do is they come in and GEMT looks at how much it costs you to run an ambulance call based on fuel, your building, your electric bill, your gas bill, your wages, all those things, and they set the rate. This is what it's going to be. So it's kind of become a standard and a norm throughout the county is we've all done it and we've all looked at it and we said, okay, this is what we're going to set our rates to. Doesn't change, it's increased our rate, but it doesn't change the fact that we're not charging, we're only capping the residents at $600. We're not charging them more, okay? Because obviously our rate is higher than $1,600, which is what you were billed how many ever years ago. So what GEMT does is when we do that, we get more return on our Medicaid patients. Typically trying to get money out of Medicaid in the state is a pain in the rear, right? So if you sign up for the GEMT program, it's easier to recoup your money, okay? And what we do is once we get that, 50% of that gets paid back to the state of Illinois. So really we're only getting 50% of what we're billing through Medicaid, but it's better than what we were doing before. So we've had the ability to increase our revenues through billing a little bit that way. So, next one was, do you apply for any grants, federal or state? Yes, we do, every year. The AFG grant, which is the Assistance to Firefighters grant, we apply for that every year. This year, or last year, we put in for air packs because our air packs are getting older. It's going to cost us probably somewhere in the range, well, now it's going to be right around $200,000 to replace our air packs because they do have a limit. They're over 10 years old. I think ours are actually closer to 15 years old. So we put in again this year for that grant. We're pretty confident this year because equipment is a high priority for this grant. Last year it wasn't, so we didn't get it last year, so we're hoping this year we get that. As far as state grants are concerned, we do put in for state grants. There's a small equipment grant for $26,000. That's only $3 million that goes out across the entire state, so it's a pretty tough grant to get. But we put in for it, and that can be used for hand tools, extrication equipment, things like that. We haven't gotten it since I've been around here, so, but we still try. I guess next one, staffing grants, kind of falls into that same thing. Are there staffing grants available? There is. There's a staffing grant through FEMA that's out there. Have we applied for that? We have, but we didn't get picked. And unless we pass this referendum, I don't think we'll put in for it next year. Reason being is because it's a short-term grant. It's 3 years. First year they pay 75–80% of that employee's what it costs to employ them. The next year it drops, the next year it drops, and then you're on the hook for it, the entire thing. So the more I looked into it, the more, last year when I put in for it, I did it kind of last minute because I was fresh getting here, trying to do other things. I'm like, hey, let's just try it. And I really didn't do all the research into that grant that I needed to do. And I've had a lot more time to do the research now. And the problem is if we get to a point, because we're going to get there, we need to hire full-time people probably within the next 4 years. We need to have at least, probably in my opinion, at least one full-time person per shift so we have some consistency. Well, if I hire them on this grant and give them insurance, I give them a retirement, I give them all those things, and we don't have any increase in revenues or our budget, at the end of that, I'm laying them off because I can't afford them anymore. Or I'm dropping down staffing. So there's grants there, and we're going to go after it. If we get this, we're going to go after it. We're going to try to put somebody full-time here. But it's you don't want to get that, because I know of a department that did that and ended up laying off 3 full-time people. And it's a bigger town. So, yes, there are grants available. So have you considered changing to an association so you can do fundraising? Is that the correct question? Okay. No, we have not. And no, we will not. We can't run an organization on a hope and a prayer, right? This is emergency services, right? This is people's lives and property. You know, I can't run a department or ask these people, maybe this year we get the $1 million or 1.5 million that we need to run the organization. Maybe we get those donations. Well, what if we don't? Then what do we do? Right? What if we only get 250,000? Then what? You know, I appreciate the question, I appreciate the thought, because we do have a firefighters association. They did, pre-COVID, did quite a bit of fundraising. Since then, and since our diminished, COVID killed us as many departments, as far as people leaving the fire service. What, 80%? Is that what we figured? 80% of our staff or higher is outside the city limits of Harvard. So getting people to come back and do more fundraising and things like that is really tough. The people that live in town and work milk days and do those different things, they're very active. We have several members that are active on different communities within the town, so and to ask them to do more We ask, but we don't always get the yes. So that's why going to an association wouldn't make any sense for us. So do we have a rainy day fund? The answer to that is yes. We have a rainy day fund. Why? Because we have to make capital purchases. I can tell you that in July, I'm taking delivery of an engine down in Marengo that I paid $630,000 for, and that was 19 months ago. If I ordered, I just talked to the salesman because he saw that we had gotten an engine grant for $350,000. That zero interest loan calls me. He's like, hey, are you interested? I'm like, what would that engine cost me now that I'm going to get in July? $1.3 million is what it costs now for that engine. It's gone up over $400,000, almost $700,000 since we ordered it 19 months ago. That's crazy. So yes, we have a rainy day fund. At the end of our fiscal year last year, we had $1.55 million in our rainy day fund. Okay? That's to build buildings. That's what we're going to use to replace the parking lot. That's, the furnaces, those things that are outside of our operating budget. I can't take that money from those general funds and shove it into payroll. It doesn't work that way. There's laws against that. We can't do that, right? So we save money, and I want to throw this out there, because this is, so that 1.55 million, 964,000 of that 1.55 million was from a donation in a land sale 10 years ago? 20 years? When they donated that farm and then they sold it for 900 and some thousand? I tried to do the research and the history on it and I couldn't find it, but I know it's a long, long time ago. That's 964,000 that's sitting in that trust and is still sitting in that trust since they sold it 20 years ago. So in that 20 years, we've been able to put about another $600,000 in the bank. That's not going to go very far, as you can appreciate, at a $1.3 million for an engine. We just paid $200,000 for a remount ambulance, which that ambulance, if we bought that new right now, would be right around $350,000. It's no different. Our world is probably worse than general consumers. When we go to Walmart, everything went up in price. But the second you put fire department on it, a sticker on there, it triples that. A hammer. That's, it's fire department safe. It doesn't spark. It's a non-sparking hammer. Well, it's a $350 hammer. So you can go up to a gas leak, it's just throwing a number out there, but that's the world we live in, right? And so I can appreciate the fact that we're all struggling. We are, right? The economy is not where we want it to be. Inflation sucks, right? The cost of goods have gone up. Fuel's going up. We're in an election year. We don't know what's going to happen, but I'm here to tell you that we need to provide a service. You need us to provide a service. You want better protection. I know you and I we haven't had a chance to discuss it yet, but we talked about some calls and you had some questions about some calls. That's why it's important. If you went through what you went through and you witnessed what you witnessed, we may not agree, but you should appreciate the fact that we need more help. We need more people in the station. And I will stand by these guys till I'm purple in the face. They are doing everything that they can do with limited staffing. And too many times in the situation that we discussed in terms of the fire, they shouldn't be doing. Because we're bound 2 in and 2 out. You have to have 2 people outside before you can send 2 people inside. And we're running with 3. So for us to go in and get somebody, we're already going in there. And if they get in trouble, there's nobody there till Marengo or Woodstock or Hebron or whoever, wherever it's closest to, gets there to pull them out. That's asking a lot. That's asking a lot of our people. So, all right, with that, if you guys have any questions, please come up to the microphone, ask your question. I'd be happy to answer it. Did I get all your questions? Well, except for the one I got to call.
I know Dick and I got on in 72. That's when the volunteer was there. Now you have to pay somebody to come. But my suggestion, and it's just a suggestion, if you would list what a new engine costs, a new ambulance, all the equipment inside, people would know more of what they're spending on also to get the equipment and keep up with the rest of the world. Does the NFPA still, after 25 years, kind of knock a fire engine out of service?
Yeah, 25 years is kind of the standard, and that's, you know, that not only does the NFPA, is that's kind of a standard that they kind of got to be phased out, but when you're talking about writing grants, like the AFT grant,
Yeah.
they won't even look at an application unless the engine's over 25 years old. I actually just helped Capron Fire write one. They've got a 28-year-old engine that they're trying to get a grant for this year, so.
And also with newer equipment, fire insurance also goes down also.
We're waiting to hear back from that. And that's a great thing to bring up. It's called your ISO rating. Your insurance, your fire insurance is based on our ISO rating. So they look at our staffing levels, they look at our training, they look at our equipment age and what we have for equipment, our response times. And I know the mayor's sitting back here, it falls on them too because it's based on their water supply system and the hydrants. You know, so there's a lot that goes into that. You know, 70% of the score comes from the fire department and what we're doing. 30% of the score comes from the city and our water supply.
And
Which
from
we're
what I
good.
understand, you can't even
For
do
that for you.
mutual aid out of here anymore?
Not unless we get a callback person, so nights and weekends.
Okay. That's all I have. Hopefully it changes, helps not only Harvard, but the rural area. And hopefully it'll pass. But if it doesn't, next time, I think if you just tell people what's back when we were on, engine cost what, 150,000? I mean, it's like a pickup truck now. You
Right,
can't get
yeah,
them
you
for
can't buy a
50.
truck for that, yeah. for
So
sure.
anyway, that's my thought.
Go ahead. If you don't want to come up, just ask it and I'll repeat it.
Will the departments get upset because we can't do mutual aid? So they-
You know what? The only people in Marengo get mad, I guess, do other departments get upset when they have to respond to us, but we don't return the favor? I would say Woodstock, Hebron, and Marengo doesn't, we have a choice, right? But we're not gonna let our neighbors, struggle. Woodstock's board, their trustees and their chiefs, and they're all very good and they want us to help. But it's the rank and file that we're more concerned about, the firefighters. They're already, like Woodstock, they're a busy department. They're over 5,000 calls a year, so those guys that are on ambulances, they're up all night. So then to have Harvard call them at 2:00 in the morning, and not to mention, it's not good practice, and Mabus and that organization, Mabus Illinois, is a huge organization, and we've all signed agreements to help each other, and nobody's going to not respond, but we need to get to where we're more self-sufficient and we're there to return the favor. I'm more concerned about running our own calls because it's going to happen. My biggest fear, and we've come close a few times, is we're going to be on a call for the broke toe, but because they called 911, we got to go, and we're going to have somebody not breathing, or we're going to have a fire, or some major event, and we're not going to have the people to respond because we're dealing with this. Because we get those calls, and
How far away is that house?
What's that?
It's on the second call comes in for Harvard Fire. How long is it taking another ambulance to get up into Harvard?
so how long does it take to get that other ambulance into Harvard? That's a great question, and that's a wild answer. I mean, it just really depends on the size of our district. I don't know, if you read the paper, we have 108 square miles that we cover. So, end to end's a long way, so it could be 15 minutes, it could be 20 minutes, it could be 25 minutes. It can get up there, when I say 25 minutes, you're like, holy cow, that's a long time. Well, if that call is the northeast portion of our district right next to Hebron, but they're on their own call, so now I have to call Woodstock, who's that much further away, and God forbid, well, I'll tell you, a couple of years ago, we had a bad car accident right in front of the Bigfoot Inn, and we had to bring Marengo's squad all the way up there to help do extrication and patient care. That's a big piece of equipment. It took them like 27 minutes to get there. So we had people laying on the ground and trapped in cars for 27 minutes before we got more help there to help get them out. So, yeah, I think, yeah, I remember we were talking about that, yeah.
On average, how many hours does each firefighter get in week's time?
So it really varies. So the question was, how many hours does each firefighter get? So we provide 24/7 coverage. We have people in the station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So what we do is people bid their shifts. They go in and they pick on a program, a scheduling program, as to when they're available. Now, there are rules, obviously, like anybody else or any other company. You have to pay overtime and those things. So we have to be conscious of that. We haven't run into that too much as far as overtime. We've had a few people that have worked quite a few hours. But typically in a month's time, before having to pay overtime, our people can work 212 hours. That would give them even 24-hour shifts. It'd be 9 24-hour shifts. But that would include 4 hours of overtime on top of that, because that would put them over. So when you talk about bigger departments and how they staff, they have to do what's called a Kelly day or work reduction day to bring those down. What's that? No, they can get more, but we would have to pay them overtime. And typically, most people don't want that, because that would be working every third day. So they would work 24, they'd be off 48. They would work 24 and they're off 48. Most of our people have other jobs. You know, whether they're other fire departments or they're in construction, things like that. You know, typically our guys that are working more of that kind of a schedule, they're younger, you know, they're in their early 20s, they're working through their certifications, they're getting their training, they're getting their paramedic, and now they're going and they're testing for those bigger departments. You know, your Algonquins, your McHenrys, your Huntleys, your Rockford, all those bigger departments, they're going to start testing for those. So we are a training ground, and that's a financial burden for us. You know, we spend a lot of money on turnout gear. You know, it costs about, just coat and pants is about $2,000. Where's my quartermaster? He wasn't. $2,500 for one firefighter, just a coat and a pant. And then you got to give them the $300 and some $50 boots and the 200, or how much the helmet now? $450 for a helmet, $450 for boots, and $350 for a helmet. So yeah, so prices go up, or, you know, they're going up for us as well.
You stated in the paper that we're a stepping ground to the bigger departments.
Correct.
You sent somebody to school for fire training and EMT. What does that cost?
So typically, if we're, right now, from paramedic school is $3,500, right? $3,500 for paramedic school. It's right about $3,000 for the fire academy. So that's if you have to throw EMT into there. I think EMT is another $2,000. I don't know the exact numbers off my head. But we kind of, rule of thumb, it's about $12,000 by the time you outfit them and train them if they come in nothing.
So they complete the courses. Are they allowed to leave immediately, or?
Yeah.
So there's no stipulation that we're going to spend all this money on you and you're going to walk? You don't?
So we've tried that in the past.
You're going to
Yeah.
give us at least 4 years service?
Right.
Or you're going to pay us back?
Yeah, so what he's asking is there any way to keep these people from leaving? You know, we can have them sign a contract that says you're going to stay here for 3 years. But the problem becomes is when they get hired at that other department, most of those departments have rules to where they can't, no secondary employment, meaning they can't work for another fire department. So now the only thing we can do is we can try to sue them, you know, for that, to get them to, you know, pay us back that money. But by the time you do attorney fees and give somebody notices, I mean, really, if you're just, I don't even think you're breaking even at that point. You know, the only time I've ever seen it successful was we had an employee that, and this wasn't here, had an employee we put through paramedic school. They got hired in Schaumburg, and they literally graduated paramedic school and were starting in Schaumburg the next day. And the old chief down there called Schaumburg's chief and said, "Hey, we just put her through this, and she signed this agreement, and now she's leaving." He's like, "All right, she doesn't start till she pays you." Unless you get a guy like that, you know, we're chasing them with attorneys. And
The association's already
So could we make Algonquin's Association do that? Yeah, I don't know, maybe, but that, really Algonquin, I'm not sure if they have an association.
Might get 3-4 years use of it.
Right, and we try to, and we do, in terms of, there's other positions that they can fill within the department outside of that paramedic role. We need the drivers, we need, the firefighters, we need the EMTs that can drive the ambulance and assist the paramedics in the back. So that we're getting something out of them. It's just getting them, once they're at that paramedic level, keeping them long-term is a little more difficult. So we usually have them, on average right now, if you get a kid that comes in, and we're a little more open to it than other departments, I can tell you we don't do it in Marengo. We'll bring somebody on who has zero experience right out of high school. They got to be 18 years old, right? We'll bring them on and we'll get them into EMT school and we'll sponsor them and they'll do ride time there. They'll make a little bit of money. They ain't gonna make a lot, right? They're gonna make a little bit, and we'll get them through the fire academy. So now they can start filling those roles as a firefighter EMT. Because in paramedic school, that's a year and a half, almost 2 years long, right? So we get them that whole time as a firefighter EMT while they're going to paramedic school, and then hopefully we get them a little bit longer after that, but it just really depends.
Have you ever done a contract with them to say that they have a wage garnishment, whether it be like $10 per paycheck or?
The problem is, can we do a contract with a wage garnishment? We probably could as a payback. We've never done that. I don't think we've ever looked into it, at least not in my time. Maybe they did prior. But the problem is what if they don't have a wage to garnish? You know what I'm saying? If they got that full-time job, and when people go to those full-time jobs, there's commitments there. They're on probation for their first year. We have 2 guys that we're fortunate we're going to get back that just started in Huntley. They get off probation March 19th, that were on Harvard, went through paramedic school, did all the things, were firefighters. They got hired full-time in Huntley. Well, that first year, they can't work anywhere else for several reasons. One of them is in terms of Harvard. I don't want them here. You have a full-time job. If you get hurt here, you're going to lose your full-time job. That's a full-time pension job. We can't take that risk, right? But because they're probationary. Once they're off probation and they've done the work that they need to do there, because they're going to put in extra time there for that, then we want you back. And if that department allows it. Fortunately, Huntley does. Huntley allows those guys to come back and have secondary employment. There's a lot of departments that don't. So.
I started with the fire department 9 years ago. The only way I'm working with the fire department is at the time the fire department was able to pay for my EMT class, they paid for my fire academy, and they were able to pay for my hours of my training. How many members in the last 3 years has the department been able to afford to send through EMT or send through the academy?
We don't do that anymore. We done 0. Actually, I take that back. I'm gonna say 1, and that was Lieutenant Pierce, Nikki Pierce. We sent her because she had longevity and she had worked some volunteer hours, and that was to pay for her education, and she never cashed that in. So I did not want to hold, when I took over, cut payroll, did all the things that I did. She's like, I want to go to paramedic school, and we're desperate for paramedics. I said, she's like, I've got all these hours, but you took them away. I said, okay, I'm going to honor that because you've been on this department a long time. You're a lieutenant. You put in that work. We're going to honor it. So we spent the $3,500 on Nikki, but prior to that, or since then, we haven't done anybody the last 2 years.
We talk about having contracts for people and all these different things. But that's someone that's put in double-digit years to the department, that put in time, was able. That we like to go to, because I can't afford the $6,000 from somebody with the academy, neither can the department. He paid his own way through EMT school because the department can't afford to do that. So when we talk about having these contracts and things like that, we used to be able to afford to do that. Now we budget for continuing education. And
So just in a nutshell, what he was saying is, several years ago, we used to do the contracts where we would be able to pay for people's education. And this is for the people on YouTube. But since that time, we haven't been able to afford to do that. Because our training does, our paramedics, we have to pay them to come back for training, and our EMTs, it's 100 hours that they have to get in so they can recert every 4 years. So,
I don't think it's so much that we pay for them to go. It's, you need the money for wages. You need the money for new equipment. But there's no accountability for that said person to stay with this department. This department took $12,000 to send somebody to school that just turned around and went right to Huntley. And now you're out $12,000, which is $12,000 that you could have given Don a raise for.
well, and so she's saying, let me repeat so I can kind of touch on that. So what she's saying is, it's not right that we're spending $12,000 on that new recruit, right? By the time we equip them and do everything. And then they're just leaving and going to another department, and the accountability in terms of that. Again, I agree. It sucks. You can ask Tom Linneman, Hebron's chief. You can ask Brian Heimsoff, Union's chief. All these departments like Harvard that we had up on that board, we're all in the same boat. And it's not a knock to Huntley. It's not a knock to Woodstock. It's not a knock to Algonquin or Arlington Heights or Palatine or Schaumburg or any of those departments, because they have the same issues. They have to put people in those vehicles to respond to emergencies. And by their tax base, they can afford to pay a lot more than we can to get them there. The market right now for firefighter paramedics is insane. I can tell you, the Elgin Fire Department, I have a lot of good friends that are on the Elgin Fire Department. They will hire an EMT today. That's it. Because they're no different than us. They need the manpower, but they will hire an EMT. And they're going to send them to NIPSTA Fire Academy. That person's going to spend 9 weeks there, and they're going to go through the fire academy. Then they're going to come back, and the way their department's structured, they have so many paramedics on staff before the next guy goes. So they'll get some time out of that new recruit that's a firefighter EMT. But when it's their turn to go to paramedic school, now they got to go to paramedic school. Okay, so it's really hard for us to compete with that. I know Algonquin's changing their hiring practices to require it to be a firefighter EMT, and I believe the way they're going to word it is it'll be a firefighter EMT that's been accepted to or currently in the paramedic program. They've never done that. It's always been a firefighter medic before you can go there full time. So. I believe, JJ, help me out, the association does have a scholarship fund? Or they had, maybe at one time?
We have one, we have not used it in a while. There's been,
Okay. So it sounds like to me, so the question was, can we set up a scholarship? So yes, we could do that through our association. That's where I would recommend to do it, is through our association. So then they could, sponsor that student or, and there's actually one of the things that we're pushing is McHenry County College has a program right now, a grant that they've got that they're paying for all of their education. So I know there's several fire departments that are jumping on that, and we're going to be one of them.
Also, the old Motorola plant, like, can you get any money out of that?
Okay, so the old Motorola plant, can we get money out of them? Yes, and we do. They are on the tax, so we do. It's the property tax, so we do get something out of them. So, are you familiar? Like, I explained the EAV, but just so you understand, there's a difference between a fire district and the City of Harvard Police Department. The difference is the mayor and city council can set the budget and they can move money around from the water department, whatever, to adjust things as needed, right? And they can change sales tax, they've got more fuel tax, all these different things, right, that they can, ours is ours, that's it. What we get is what we get, as far as a district goes. So we can't apply a tax on motor fuel, or we can't do anything on sales tax, things like that. It's just whatever we're levying at that time. Yeah, and
Can you, break down, what's the most type of,
so she's asking what our call volume, the number of calls we have. Seems like a lot for this area. It's pretty normal. I don't want to say that we're busy, but a lot of our calls, 90% of our calls are ambulance calls. And we, again, we'd be a little bit higher if we were going to other towns. We're not, so we're down a little bit. But a majority of our calls are ambulance calls, and that's industry wide. The ambulance kind of went away from, wow, I'm really in trouble here, I need an ambulance, to, well, I'll just drive myself to the hospital. Well, now it's the ambulance is the hospital. And there's more things that they're asking us to do in the ambulance. Our paramedics are pushing medications, narcotics that doctors and some nurses can't even push in some settings. So, what we do, our job is, it's not like it was when these guys got on, how many years ago? What'd you say, what year was it? 70s? 71? Did they have an ambulance in 71? Well, yeah, it was Harvard Rescue, right? Yeah, you were separate.
Well, after the ambulance, we funded the ambulance out of the fire district money we gave them, and they operated on
Yeah.
strictly volunteer, no wage, no nothing.
So yeah, the fire service has really changed. And it's called fire-based EMS now. It's fire departments. There's only, that I know of, 3 rescue squad districts left in the state of Illinois. 2 of them are here. Marengo Rescue Squad and Genoa are the only 2 rescue squad districts left in Illinois. And I know Marengo Rescue Squad District was the first to form as a district. And I think I would say Harvard Rescue, I don't think they ever did. Yep. Yep. And when you guys combined, that levy rate you set, that's the one we're running right now.
Actually, we were at about 17.17 at that time. Always the lowest of the lowest.
Mhm.
So what you're asking is 32.328899,
That's what we're at right now.
40.49, is it?
Yeah, I'd have to give you the look at the question. I think it gives a full 6-digit number on the question that it's going to increase. It's like 0.17, yada, yada, which I have in my papers here, but yeah, it'd be almost 1.15 or something. Or this, yes, up to about 0.5, correct. So we'd be comparable, if we were to pass it, we'd be comparable to Wonder Lake, Spring Grove, Cary. You look at Cary, like where we would be getting, well, geez, does that mean Harvard's going to get $4 million? No, because our EAV isn't as valuable as what Cary's is, so that's why there's going to be but the future's looking bright in Harvard. I mean, what's the street, Two Dogs Way, where the dog food place is? There's some great things happening out there, and there's a lot of stuff that's coming to town. You know, this increase should last us quite a while. It should last us a long time. You know, that's a good thing.
Years ago, without a referendum, you could go to 0.45.
Well,
That's why you see all the big ones up there.
you still had to go to, you're limited,
You could only go up a small percentage each year.
right?
Your max was
Your max,
0.45.
and that's the same now. It's still 0.4 for corporate, your corporate tax, and 0.4 for your EMS ambulance tax. So in total, it's 0.8. But that Woodstock one, because there's a separate tax, or separate line item on your tax bill for the pension, that's why they're where they're at.
So if we could do it, why haven't we went up without a referendum
We do every year, but we're limited
on the amount you
on the amount you can go up.
could?
It's usually,
You could go up to that
no,
now. You want to go over.
no, it's the limiting rate. We can only go up so high, year to year. Right, before tax cap, thank you. Yeah, before tax cap you could. Yep. Right.
Can I interject something, John?
Sure.
And give
Go
some
ahead.
data? So, I have the question that I'm looking at. So the rate that's being requested is an increase of 0.17 over the rate that you see there of 0.328899. That would take the rate to 0.498360, just less than 0.5. The $170, so there's a lot of, and so I want to make a couple things clear. The city of Harvard, our property tax is only taxed on properties within our corporate limits. The Harvard Fire Protection District is significantly larger than the city of Harvard corporate limits. The district has about 108 square miles of territory or jurisdiction, which essentially is all of the 6033 zip code, and takes you to the border with Woodstock, to Marengo to the south, Boone County to the west, and Walworth to the north. So it incorporates a significant amount of farmland that is not inside the city of Harvard. And that's why they are a district, a taxing district, because they're able to tax that much larger geography than the city is able to tax. Okay, so that's number one. The fire protection district is separate, and on your property tax bill, you'll see a list for the fire protection district, and that is the value of taxes that will go to the protection district. I also want to note that there is two terms that are used in taxes. One is the equalized assessed value. That's the EAV. And the EAV is 33% and a third value of your fair market value, or also called fair cash value. So currently, for every property of about $100,000, you already pay a tax on your property tax to the fire department. That is about $110. Their increase is asking and that's per $100,000 of fair cash value. So if you're not your EAV, but your fair cash value, which is 33 and a third, of the 3 times the value of the EAV. So the fair cash value right now, you pay for about $100,000 home, you pay about $110 a year in tax. This increase would increase that tax to about $170 per 100,000. So what they're asking for is $170 per 100,000 increase. It really is more like an increase of about $60 per $100,000. And hopefully that helps people understand.
Yeah.
Yes, and as John did state, state statute dictates how the question is worded on the referendum, but the big piece that's missing is you already pay over $100 per $100,000 of fair market value. The increase is going to increase it to about $170. So your total value increase on your taxes that they're asking for is about $60 per 100,000. That's what the ask is.
That's what you should be putting.
Yeah, 'cause that made it look
Well,
like the
when we talked about it in the paper, with the paper, it didn't get put in quite the way we had explained it, so.
Hopefully that helps
I
explain so you can
yeah.
understand what it's going to cost you as a homeowner if the referendum passes and whether you decide you want to vote for it or not. It's very clear that the Fire Protection District needs more funding to be able to perform their missions. And as John stated, their only revenue source is property tax. The city has other revenue sources, but the Fire Protection District, their only revenue source is property tax and then whatever they back charge, residents for services.
Yeah, we do, in terms of tax, that's our only revenue. We do have alternative revenue sources, which, obviously we talked about the grants, the billing for EMS and those things, but yes, a majority of our money that we utilize to operate is the property tax. Hang on, I'm gonna go to her because she's been trying.
What I want to know is who can we see if we want to canvass door to door and explain this to people?
So you can talk to, we have a volunteer committee. Laura and Scott are a part of that. They're heading that up for me because I got a lot of things, a lot of irons in the fire and places I need to be and people I need to talk to. So, they're heading that up for us. There are signs available. There are some pamphlets, and things that are available. So. Any other question, Amy?
So I've obviously, maybe not everybody knows, I FOIA requested a lot of information over the last.
A lot is a small term.
Well, here's the thing. I'm also showing an accounts receivable aging report that you're owed $300,000.
From,
Oh, this goes back for 4 or 5 years. The money that you've billed out, that's still outstanding.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
$300,000.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yep, and so what happens periodically, what we'll have to do is those people, so our billing company is Andres Billing, that's who does medical billing, they do all of our medical billing. That's not uncommon. We're probably, a majority of those, going after them through collections. So a lot of those get written off. Why? Because we were given the wrong name or the wrong social security number. As you can imagine, that happens from time to time in this country and is going to get worse as things go along. So, yes, you are correct. There is, in terms of that, and as far as the aging of that goes, I guess I should have repeated the question. Amy said that there's, in our accounts, that there's over 300,000 that we haven't collected for like 4 or 5 years. And she's correct. We chase these people, we try to get paid. Typically, they're non-residents that owe us that money, so we'll send them to collections. But like I said earlier, we cap our residents at 600 now. We never used to collect. We do now, just at 600. And we're not real big fans of going after people and locally, but I don't want to send somebody to collections. I would say if you're concerned, come talk to us. The board has given me the ability that if you can show a hardship, we can work with you. We'll work with you. We'll take payments. We're not going to send you to collections. I don't care if you're giving us $25 a month. That's fine. We're not going to send you to collections for that. We want to work with our residents. You guys pay taxes. I get it. We all get it, right? But we still have to operate, so we still have to try to find those additional sources.
Me as a taxpayer request this information and all of a sudden you're still owed $300,000.
Right, I know. It's deceiving in the fact that, yes, and we do owe it, but how much do you pay the lawyer? And I'd be curious to see how many calls that was over the last 5-6 years or however long it's been. Well, I wouldn't even know where to start. I mean, Andres would probably charge me all kinds of money, which then you'd have to pay because I charge you for the FOIA request. But that, typically, where do you stop? You know what I mean? It goes back to how much do you want to pay in attorney fees to collect a $500 bill or a $1,000 bill?
But when you're going for a referendum and somebody says, let me see that number, knowing that you guys were going for referendum, you should have called called up and said, we need to write this off. We need to show that for 2023, we're only owed 44,000.
But if some of those, yeah, but if some of those are recent,
Well, if
you know what I mean?
2023, you're owed 44,000.
I'd rather have this conversation like we're having right now. And that's the point of this meeting, is for you to ask me, why do you have all this money sitting out there that you haven't collected? Well, because we can't find the people, or they're refusing to pay. There's a million different reasons as to why, but I'm not just going to give up on it. I got nothing to hide. I guess that's the other thing. If you would have FOIA'd that and you saw that, last week they wrote all this off before they sent me this information, then I get a different question from maybe. Why are you trying to hide all that? You know what I'm saying? So,
It doesn't necessarily mean that you're hiding it, but this goes over a long term. You're asking for money out of your community, but then when they see that, they're like, wait a minute.
right, I understand what you're saying, but
It's, you gotta, I guess, see it from my standpoint, but then I FOIA'd your budget.
Mhm.
I read your budget, and I read negative numbers that should be positive numbers. So I was completely confused, and I even sent it to a controller to read it.
okay. So you saw in our budget, you saw negative numbers
It should have been a positive.
that should have been a positive.
$600,000 in wages, but you only spent 400. But it shows that you've got a negative $248,000.
Okay, but with that,
Possible.
because of the money that we've spent paying Northwest Rescue, that $55 an hour to come back and cover.
Personnel, correct?
That's part of personnel and payroll,
Your budgeted amount was 650.
okay?
Your
So-
actual was only 400.
Okay, no, that's still, here's where I think you're getting confused. And this is where I go back to so you're saying that we budgeted only, 600,000, okay?
For your general fund, you budgeted 291, and you actually spent 282.
So you were on this sheet?
For general
Correct.
funds,
This is the April 30th, 2023 fiscal end. Okay, so what's the number you're looking at?
the 291.
I think I'm on the wrong sheet. So, oh no, I got it. Personnel. I got it. Yes.
Okay.
So this is what's come out of general fund. This is a rainy day, part of the rainy day fund that we talked about. Okay. Now, if you keep looking on that thing, that same sheet that you FOIA'd, you'll get,
All three.
right, that's what I mean. You got all three, because there's three different accounts we're looking at here, right? So you'll look at the ambulance fund for end of year, April 30th, 2023.
Correct.
You'll also see in there that personnel, 693,240.
Is what you budgeted, but your actual expense you have is 409.
Okay, keep going.
But then you have a negative 283,000. Where you shouldn't
So-
have, you should have a positive because you didn't spend it.
But we did, because you still have to, the way our budget works and the way Lauterbach and Amon sets it up. Okay, I wish you would have gotten, let me see, I should have it here. What we actually budgeted for, and this is how I work and build our budget every year, okay? Lauterbach and Amon is the accounting service that we use, and they do a great job with this stuff. So this sheet here, okay, this is how I budget off of one. I'm taking the corporate fund and the ambulance fund, and I'm combining them together, and I'm saying, here's our budget. Our actual, let me get to it here. We are at, I gotta go one more sheet here. Oh, here we go, personnel. So we actually budgeted in our $984,400. That's what our budget was this current year. I wanna, before you start adding those numbers, that was end of year last year, okay?
2023.
Right, and so we increased that to this year. So just so it makes sense with how that gets split with Lauterbach and Amon, okay? So we budgeted in payroll $984,400 this year, okay? That is payroll as a whole. That's medical, that's payroll taxes, that's workman's comp, that's all of that stuff. That's what we budgeted, okay?
What was
Our
the
actual, what's that?
What was the actual?
This is still current.
This is the one we're still working through. So
So you're actually.
So
you
paid
got
on-
one- You got one that ends 2024,
excuse me.
not the one for 2023, which is the one that was
Correct.
given.
Right. So, but I'm trying to give you an example of why you have three separate and not just one.
No, I
So-
know I have three separate.
So we, actual pay for our 24-hour people, 702,000 is what we budgeted this year. For administrative salaries, 134,000. Officer salaries, 60,000. So what I can tell you that we've spent thus far as of January 31, we're at 540,000 of the 984 we've spent. Here's the kicker. How many months has it been since we've gotten a bill from Northwest Rescue? So I'm thinking we're probably, I don't even want to guess. I know in 1 month's time or 2 months' time, we spent about $25,000 out of payroll to have them cover our station. And I know we're well over that amount coming up. And we haven't got our bill yet for it. So,
Is a district on a calendar year or fiscal year?
fiscal year.
What is your fiscal year?
So, same city, May.
May 1 to April 30. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So, when they split that, so when I work off of it, it goes to Lauterbach and Aim, and I say, here's what we're gonna budget, here's what it's gonna look like. Then they take it and they split it between what's gonna come out of the EMS, or the ambulance, however, fund, and the corporate fund. And that's, so one of them may look like, oh, you had $400,000 left. Well, yeah, but you look at the other one and then you were over budget 200 and some $1,000, right? We budgeted heavy in payroll. I will tell you that because we didn't know what was gonna happen with Northwest Rescue and how much we were gonna have to utilize them. So we budgeted really heavy in payroll and cut back in a lot of other areas to be able to do that because, I can't project what's gonna happen 3 months from now. Man, we could have a rash of people, quitting, going to other jobs. We could have, there's so many different things that, we try to put the money in places because we're limited as what we can do. Once that budget's set and approved, and there's only so much we can do within the budget to move money around. I wish you could just use it like a checkbook, but you can't, right? We got to be held accountable. And so I hope that answers your question. I hope that makes a little more sense, so yes, no. All right, well, if you want to talk more about it, I'd be happy to do it.
25,000 to the northwest, how many days would that be?
Oh man, it varies. I wish I could. That was about 2 months' time, maybe a month, 2 or 3 months. Yeah, it really varies on the month because obviously more people are going to vacation and do other things. And phew, I thought it was mine, so I feel better.
So it's like $55 an hour to hire them.
Yeah,
Would you be better off spreading that 55 out over the $20 you're paying, pay a little more and not have so many Northwest Herald people,
Northwest Rescue. So wouldn't we be? So the question was, would we be better off spreading that money out instead of hiring Northwest Rescue to come in and cover for us? Absolutely would. I'd love to pay our people at $55 an hour. But, well, I know, but I mean, the reality of it is it comes back down to we just don't have the people. I mean, our website is in the progress of being updated. It's a little deceiving. We don't have the number of people that we've had in the past. We don't. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to raise our hourly rate and what we can pay to get people to come here and work.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Take that $55 an hour and spread that out over the other employees, you could bring them up to $24, $25, and you might be able to entice people to come in.
You could, but we got to get to that point. We got to get to the point now. What I'm saying is, and I don't disagree with you, it makes me sick, and I love Northwest Rescue. They're doing us a huge favor, and the Kurth boys are great guys, but I hate giving them money. I want it to stay here in the district, I want our people to get that. They deserve it. They're working hard, but they're doing us a huge favor by allowing their people to come here and work. You know,
Correct me
so
if I'm wrong, John, but isn't there a shortage of
there's a
EMS?
huge shortage, and that's the problem. I mean, even if I could pay them all $55 an hour, I don't know how many more we would get, and that's industry wide. You know, there's such a shortage for firefighter paramedics. It's crazy. I've never seen it like this. You know, we got full-time departments in McHenry County. Well, I'll use Marengo. We just did a test, and this is for a full-time position, downstate Article 4 pension, great, phenomenal health insurance, life insurance, the whole 9 yards. We have 8 people that took our test. I know at one time, don't quote me currently, but Crystal Lake was down like 11 people. Huntley's down 4 or 5. And these are departments that are paying $80,000-$90,000 a year or more to come there and work full time and get those same benefits, and they're getting 15, 20, 30. How many people tested when Noah took his test? Noah and Brighton, you know, maybe 25 or 30 for Huntley. You know, these are jobs where when I first got in, I was testing. My first test I ever took was a consortium test, and there was 2,500 people there, 4 departments for 2 jobs. Now, you'd be lucky if you get 10, 20. It's crazy. People just aren't interested in coming into this profession. So, hope that helps. I agree with you, and I want to do that. I absolutely do, but it's tough. Go ahead.
That is right now spending that $55 an hour to Northwest for paramedic, at times spending a different amount for EMTs for Northwest at times. Things like well, the goal is not just to maintain 3 people in the station or 2 people in the station at times, it is to increase the president of the cardiac arrest sometimes where we have 2 people responding because that's what's in the station. On a motor vehicle accident, we have 2 people in an ambulance and 1. So that 55 that we see going to Northwest, that's because we need the help from them. It's not a sustainable cost that we can continue to pay to Northwest.
I don't know if everybody on YouTube could hear that, but that's a lot for me to regurgitate, but it was just more discussion about the $55 an hour we're paying towards Northwest to help cover our station. Just to give you kind of what it looks like. So if you take into consideration we pay $20 an hour for a paramedic, and they 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, times 3, because 3 positions, we have to budget for 3, it's $525,000, almost $526,000. That's over half of our tax revenue right there. It's a third. It's actually, by the time you add in payroll taxes and everything else, you know, we're operating at close to 75% of our budget is towards payroll. So that's not healthy. That's why we're behind on equipment. That's why our, you know, building maintenance is gone, you know, got kind of pushed back. You know, I'm bringing to the board a $13,000 quote to fix doors. You know, so these guys can just get into the station. Right now we have one door that they can push a button on and get in. So they park in the back, run around the front, and then come in the building. But it's 13 grand to fix it. So, or replace it, I should say, because it's so old. But what are we up to? It's like 36, something like right around there. And then we have 4 or 5 ride-alongs, 4 ride-alongs. New guys, Barnett and So we got some, like 4 that are just starting to get into class, paramedic school, those things. So, and we've been to the high school. We're trying. We're working hard to recruit. We work with the college to recruit. You know, the MCC does a phenomenal job, their fire science program, of getting the word out, getting people, you know, we're involved in, they bring these kids into their fire science program. I get to sit in and do mock interviews with them, especially if there's somebody from our district. And then that's our opportunity to grab them and say, hey, unfortunately, the last 2 years, we haven't had anybody that went through that portion of MCC's program, but we're trying. We're recruiting hard. So, any other questions?
Back to the way the wording is, I think it's very confusing to the non-person who doesn't. Home value, are you talking about equalized or fair cash value?
Fair cash.
Fair cash. So it's fair cash value.
Right.
Is going to bring your total up to $170.
Correct.
And then all the rest of the wording explains that you're really only bidding.
Right.
for
It is very confusing, and I hate that, but
There's another way to look at it. If you pull out your tax bill
Yeah.
and find the line that says Harvard Fire Protection District, and it'll say .328, take that and make it .5, and then see what that line will become. That'll show you exactly what it'll.
We understand that, but the people out of here,
I've worked on referendums for 20 years here in this town, in various referendums, and it's the way the county requires it to be worded.
Right. It just
We have
says-
no say in it.
and
Actually,
it's
it's the state.
explanation.
it's state statute.
State wrote that tax cap law.
Yep.
It's confusing, and they don't understand it themselves.
No, they don't. They don't understand. If that doesn't surprise you, the state's confused. You know,
So,
there's,
for edification, I'll read the question that is on the ballot so that everybody will know. It basically says fire protection, Harvard Fire Protection District, proposition increasing the property tax extension limitation law limiting rate. So, that's called PTEL for those that are understand. That's the cap that is put on how much property tax can increase. So the question is asking to increase that limit. Shall the limiting rate under the property tax extension limitation law for the Harvard Fire Protection District, McHenry County, Illinois, be increased by an additional amount equal to 0.17% above the limiting rate for the purpose of providing fire and ambulance services for levy year 2022 and be equal to 0.498360% of the equalized assessed value of the property, taxable property therein for levy year 2024. And that's a yes or no question. Below the yes or no answer that you would fill in, additional information states: 1, the approximate amount of taxes extendable at the most recent extended limiting rate is $1,053,634.68, and the approximate amount of taxes extendable if the proposition is approved is $1,599,127.12, which is approximately an increase of $540-some thousand. Number 2, for the 2024 levy year, the approximate amount of the additional tax extendable against property containing a single-family residence and having a fair market value at the time of the referendum of $100,000 is estimated to be $170.
So it does say fair market value.
Correct. So the percentages against the equalized value, the amount that you would pay, the dollar amount that's listed, uses the fair market value. Both numbers would come out to be the same.
They come out.
Yes. But understanding, the easiest way for people to understand, and that's why number 2 is there, is that for about $100,000 home value, you're going to pay about $170. Now, what is not stated here is you already pay about $110 for the 100,000, so the increase is gonna be about $60 per $100,000 of value of your home.
If you talk to anybody out there, they think it's going up 170.
Yes, and that's because of the way the statute requires the question to be written. So it is confusing, but that's why they're hosting, the Fire Protection District is hosting this question and answer to help people understand what it actually means.
And here, I'd like to add in to your question is that people are confused by that. And that's why we're here. But that's also why I'll take any of the help I can get to get me in somewhere. I don't know if you guys have coffee clubs or book clubs or whatever. Senior center, hook me up, get me in there. I want to talk to them. All right, I want people to understand what we're doing, because we have nothing to hide. My intentions are to go down to the restaurant here in the next week. I'm going to put it out there, coffee with the chief. Come sit and talk to me. Beat me up. I want to get beat up. I appreciate the fact that Amy wants to. What's that?
The food pantry on Tuesday.
I'd be there. Amy's been pretty tough on me here tonight, and I kind of appreciate that. I'm not afraid of it. We've got nothing to hide. Well, hey, if Amy walks out of here more educated and votes yes, I win, right? So we appreciate that conversation. Yeah. Well, me too. But my wife takes most of it, but that's all right. Kind of the way that goes. So yeah, I hope if there's any more questions, I know a couple people came in late. If you guys have questions.
Over the weekend, I did the math on this on my personal property tax bill. It's gonna if it passes, it's gonna cost me $2 a week.
Okay, there you go. $2 a
My
week.
business, it's gonna add up to about $5 a week.
Additional or total?
Additional.
There you
So $2 a week on your home, which is essentially $104 for the year.
Yeah.
Additional, 104 over what you currently
On my
pay.
home, it was like $99 a year, so I just rounded it up. And my business tax rate is, or the value for the business property is higher, so I'm just $2 for the home, $3 for the business, so $5.
I think the biggest thing for most people who read the question is they think it's going to go up $170 per 100,000, and the way the question is read, it's 170 for the value, so it does not account for what you already pay, and it's in the question. So that's why, to help those that are listening, you're going to see an increase of about $60 per 100,000.
Yeah, I know, and $500,000 sounds like a lot. It is a lot of money to most of us. $500,000 is a lot of money. That's that's what we're asking to increase our budget by, essentially, is $500,000. But you start looking at like we said, the cost of equipment and all those things. That $500,000 goes quick. It really does.
Half of one fire truck.
Yep, about half of one fire engine. So, any other questions? I know we've been here for a while, and I appreciate that, and I'll stay here longer. But if you have any more questions, again, please reach out if you do. If you have or involved in any community groups you'd like us to come out and talk to and explain this to, I'd be more than happy to do it. You can get a hold of us on our Friends of the Harvard Fire Protection District Facebook page and web page. That's all up and running now. Supporters of HFPD. I do want to say I want to apologize. We were kind of late in the game getting going on this thing because there was a lot of questions on whether or not that we were going to let us put it on the ballot. And by the time we got those answers, we were already behind the 8 ball. So understand your frustrations that this kind of came out last minute, but we've been talking about it for over a year because the last time we were going to run it, they wouldn't let us put it on the ballot because you couldn't put referendums on it at that time. And then the next time we were going to run it, there wasn't an election, so we had to skip that one. So here we are for this one. So thank you for coming. Appreciate it. And any questions, let us know. Thank you.